Okay, everybody, so welcome back to Continue Freedom. I got my buddy Chuck on the line. What's going on, brother?
What's up?
Always with the quiet thumbs up. Hey, I'm good. Oh, golly. Okay, so today we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about the debate, which you tuned into the live stream, didn't you?
I did.
Me and my buddy Jeremy. Yeah, so we had a great
Jeremy.
Yeah, we had a great simulcast with Braver
Than the Rest podcast.
Heck yeah, man. Braver than the Rest where it's at. We do that every Wednesday, 9:00. We'll just sit down and just chat about all the things going on in the world. So yeah, that was a really good one, but, oh gosh, we got to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about, Chuck, you put me onto this, Tucker and Tulsi talking at, where was this? I don't even know where it was, but, it would,
I can tell you, he's on his tour right now. Hold on.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep talking.
He was in like Arizona or something like that. I forget where he was. Mm-hmm. And fantastic conversation, but they hit on one of the biggest issues that didn't really, Trump has been bringing it up a lot, but a lot of folks aren't bringing it up. This threat of nuclear war. Colorado Springs. Okay. So it's this threat of World War III. A lot of people talk about it. You know, I listen to Tim Pool every now and then, and he's always talking about civil war. So there's civil war, there's World War III, there's nuclear war, there's all this stuff on the horizon, and they hit all those big points. But before we get into it, I mean, I can throw it to you right away if you want me to, but I will tell you that if you watched the debate, this was a perfect example right here. That if you were checking in to see how how it went, and you were watching the mainstream media, this is what you got. Kamala Harris had one mistake. Donald Trump had 33. And when I saw this, I was absolutely pulling my hair out. I thought, people don't believe this. Surely. 65 million people, by the way, Chuck, tuned into the debate. It was 10 million more than the Trump-Biden debate. And do people really think that she only made one error or made one false claim? There's no way, right? I mean,
there's no way. And also, we live in a society where we value and overvalue the input and the influence of, I'm not going to mention the name on here, of rock and roll stars or rappers or celebrities. And we think, oh, well, I'll use one good reference. We think, hey, if George Clooney tells us that Kamala Harris is great, George Clooney, who's an actor who's never done any type of public service, he must be really intelligent about this. I'm sure he's the right guy. I'm sure that makes sense. He's smarter than I am, so let me listen to his voice. What we've lost in that is the ability for us to self-diagnose and have our own like BS meter, right? And so, well, you brought it up. I didn't bring it up. But my point in saying this is...
Did you see this before the show, by the way? Did you see it?
Oh, I haven't seen this
in the notes.
No, but you have to show this to me. But take a step back for listeners. Take a step back to before the debate started. Okay, the only option for, I don't call them media anymore, but for the left wing nut jobs on that have big platforms, the only option was for them to come out of it, even if Kamala had word salad the whole night and couldn't remember her last name and, whatever. The only option was going to be, she's amazing. She's our hero. Now, we've talked about this on previous Continue Freedom podcasts. She and I have the exact same amount of primary votes to be a presidential candidate.
Yeah.
The exact same amount.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
tied with me.
That means we're equally qualified, right? And so my point in saying that is, I got to plug my computer in here. It says it's going to sleep. Uh-oh. But my point in saying that is, because she's a hero, because she's a minority, because she's a female, because she is an accomplished and actually an accomplished, intelligent female who's also a politician, the only option that the left had was to say, she's our hero. She's the new shining star. She's the future of the Democratic Party. There was never going to be an option for them to be like, these are the ways that she got it wrong.
Right. Well,
But for it to be 33-1, or for David Muir or whatever the heck his name is, for him just to completely drop his pants and moon Trump and flash her or whatever, like whatever you
yeah,
want to say
yeah,
about it, like
yeah.
it was just abysmal. It was just terrible. They
It
might have
was.
just
Well,
well cozied up and made pancakes together with Kamala.
everybody was talking about it. They said, look, when this is over, and people brush off these debates, a lot of these debates, but in this instance, people were saying everybody's candidate is going to leave the winner. That's kind of how they were pitching it. I say them, those they people, the pundits and podcasters and everybody. But I didn't necessarily leave that way. I felt like Kamala was incredibly prepared. There's the conspiracy.
Absolutely.
There's conspiracy theories about the I don't know if you've seen it or not. The earrings she was wearing, and then people showed the Kickstarter where you can buy these earrings that are actually earphones, and so they're identical. They look exactly the same. So people were saying she was being fed lines. I'm not going to get into that conspiracy theory. I felt like she tucked herself away. She wasn't doing any press conferences. She wasn't doing rallies. She wasn't doing anything.
Still hasn't. 50
exactly.
days.
For 50 days. So she was preparing herself, and I don't necessarily think that Trump was prepared for that. But when it's 3 against 1, which is how this whole thing came to be, ABC, both of the moderators were siding on her side. They were framing, and I recorded a video earlier today. I'm probably going to re-record it because there's so many clips. I pulled out 33 clips of either her lying or ABC covering for her in the way that they framed the questions. I think it took him off guard. He was expecting her to be her normal bumbling self, and she wasn't. And when the moderators don't make her answer the question, but they make him answer the question, they don't fact check her, but they do fact check him. I think it threw him off his game a bit. And his only saving grace, I believe, was his closing statement saying, "Look, she says she's going to do all these things. Why hasn't she done them? She's been in office for 3 years as the vice president, and she hasn't done any of it." But it was the dishonesty is what bothers me about it. They're always dishonest to a certain degree, but the made up things, and I'm going to list a couple of them. This is actually from the Federalist, and there were 25 things that the Federalist listed, all of which I found in my videos, but there was more than this. She talked about a Trump sales tax, which has never been a thing. It doesn't exist. He's never mentioned it. It's never talked about it. So she made that one up out of the blue. She went back to the same old, January 6th being the worst thing since the Civil War. So she just discounts World War I, Pearl Harbor, World War II, 9/11, all of these.
The last 23 years in the Middle East, Abbeygate 2 years ago. I mean, yeah, all those things. Yeah, sure.
None of that matters, but a one-day kerfuffle at the Capitol. Then she says that people died there, like police officers died, and there was one person that died, and that was Ashley Babbitt. So another falsehood. She tied him to Project 2025, which has been debunked time and time again. The moderators let that go. She said that he was going to do a nationwide abortion ban, which he is not on board with, though I wish he was.
And he actually talked about that in the debate.
Yes.
He's also talked about it with Dr. Phil. He's talked about it with Sean Ryan. Like, he's made his point on all of these things super clear. And sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
There are so many things that we could talk about from last night. But I think, I've got a point that we're going to talk about in a few minutes with the Tulsi thing. But I say that my point to give you a little foreshadowing is they are telling you, meaning Kamala and the Democratic Party, they are telling you and giving you clues and breadcrumbs of what they're about.
Yeah.
And we should listen. We should pay attention. And the evidence right here and for last night is that for 50 days, like we're, 56 days from the election? 55 days? I don't know.
Yeah.
Trying to do the math. For the last 50 days, one of the two primary candidates for the leader of the free world, I'm leaning in, people, the leader of the free world hasn't done a press conference to tell you what they're about.
Yeah.
It's not on their website, but it is now. They posted last night before the debate, but
to a certain degree,
one of our primary points is a point that Trump introduced in June. Like,
Chuck,
They are
this
leaving
whole
you
thing,
breadcrumbs, and they're pointing you to what they're going to be about.
this whole thing has been a copy. It's been a copy paste of Trump and a copy paste of Biden. Her issues page on her website, that when you shared it, and was brought out by all the internet sleuths, when you shared those pages, the code data, like the data in the code for those web pages, was still linked to Joe Biden. They literally copied and pasted. So when you shared her web pages, it said "reelect Joe Biden" in the share image and in the share data. So those parts they copied and pasted. But all last night through the whole debate, she was, this is America first, bringing back American jobs. This is being energy independent. Like, it was Trump, Trump, Trump. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen, that the left, the Democrat Party, started adopting Trump policies.
Breadcrumb to bring you over here because it feels good. It sounds good. I'm a minority. I'm a female. I come from middle class. I'm going to represent you, team. Let's go. Joy. Cackle, cackle, cackle.
But yeah. But the problem is, that's what they say that's in Word, right? That's in what she said. Indeed, in the party line, there is zero chance of any of those things actually happening. And that's what bothers me the most. I almost had I don't know, call it spiritual feeling, but I was like, this is odd that somebody can be this much of a political chameleon, that can be this deceptive, that can this easily, in just 2 weeks, that's not a long time, in 2 weeks, turn on a dime 180% and that smoothly deliver Trump's line, which doesn't in any way align with the Democrat Party, by the way, saying America first, saying that we're going to become energy independent, so, all these claims that she made. And there are folks who they sat down to watch the debate and they haven't been paying attention to politics for the past 2 months. Correct. They're going to think that is where she actually stands. And it was so smooth in her delivery in a lot of ways, not in every way, but in a lot of ways. I was like, this is kind of spooky. The Antichrist can't be a female, can it?
So. And I remember 4 years ago, and there's a senator whose podcast I really enjoy. And again, I don't want to send the squirrels that are listening down rabbit holes and block things for you. So I won't talk about his name, but I'll just say that he used a phrase 4 years ago that I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, they're going to lure you to sleep with extremism.
Yeah.
And that's what my point is about the breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs, if you're an Eagle Scout like Jared is, or if you're a soldier like Jared is, and you're doing land navigation, you're studying how to get from one point to another, right? And you're studying how to leave yourself clues to get to these places. And the breadcrumbs here are Kamala is saying things that lead you to one path or another. And if you follow the path of her career, or if you just want to shorten it to the path of the last 3.5 years, they lead you to a place where you know that that's not true. Because Trump's strongest point last night, aside from his clothes, was him saying, let's stop the debate right now. I will travel with you in my plane. We will go to Washington, D.C. You can sign legislation right now to close the border.
Yeah.
But you know what? She's not going to do that.
No.
And if she was going to, she would have already done it. Heck, she would have been to the border. She hasn't done that. She's the Biden-appointed border czar. And her response to you haven't been to the border was, I haven't been to Europe.
Right,
well,
right.
I also haven't been to Ukraine. Jared hasn't been to Brazil.
And I think
there's two other arbitrary facts.
Yeah. In a crafty way last night it was still... she only mentioned a few specific policy prescriptions, and in the first question right off the bat, they asked her, are people better off? Do you believe that people are better off now than they were 4 years ago? And she never answered that question, but she went into her policy prescriptions, which was only 3. So one of them was a $50,000 tax credit for the startup of small businesses. Another one was $15,000 for a down payment on a home for families, and the other one cannot remember what
$6,000 child tax credit.
There you go, $6,000 child tax, which is $1,000 more than what Trump was going to offer. It's like, oh, you're going to offer $5,000, we'll offer $6,000. It was just this,
it's like the Price is Right when they say $1 more,
right? $1 more without going over.
101.
Right. So that's basically what it was. And other than that, there was no specificity behind what she was going to do. And I had a point. I lost my train of thought.
I just while you're thinking about it, I just point the listeners back to the idea that
Oh, I know
the
what I was going to
left
say.
was going to sensationalize, the media was going to sensationalize, regardless. She was going to be the victor no matter what. There wasn't a path for Trump to win last night.
Right.
That being said, I don't think last night Trump was as strong as he was in the Biden debate, and I hope he gets another chance. But separately, relatedly, that's why it's so important to do your homework.
Yeah.
Because if you look at this person's record, there is no chance that you can align with the idea that she is for America. She's not.
No.
She's for herself, and she's for
And she's
left wing
against
sensationalism as far as you can get it.
and she's against Trump. That was the point I was going to make before, is that other than those very small nondescript policy prescriptions, everything else was against Trump. So she kept diverting over to January 6th, to the claims that, or the quotes that have been improperly quoted when you say, "Oh, find people on both sides." All right, everybody and their brother went out and posted the full, 5 seconds left and right of that, and you see that he says, puts it in context, the bloodbath quote where he was talking about China and going to be destroying our economy. It's going to be a bloodbath for the economy, but they try to make it some violent claim. Like, all those things have been debunked, but she kept bringing them up. They were not fact checked by any of the commentators, and so those people that we're talking to here, that hey, we have to do our homework because we can no longer rely on what the mainstream media is telling us. It don't just take a debate at face value. And I implore people, follow up on both sides, on Donald Trump and on
Absolutely.
Kamala Harris. Look at the specifics of Donald Trump's, presidency and his policy prescriptions, and look at the specifics of Kamala Harris and what she has stood for the, and you can follow them for their entire careers and know exactly where they
Yeah.
stand. Donald Trump is an open book about
Abs-
those things.
Well, and the breadcrumbs work that way too, right? If they had, if they were actually for the democratic process, they would be all for examining these things. If they were willing to secure the southern border, then they'd be willing to go to the southern border. If they are willing to stop funding Ukraine, if they are willing to stop sending $100 billion to a government that every day implores their people to chant "Death to America" and "Death to Israel," then they'd say, "Oh yeah, let's talk about that." Why? But they're not talking about that. They say, "No, that's offensive. Don't ask me about that. You can't talk about that." Pivot.
Right.
January 6th. Transgenderism. They find some other topic to get off of that's more sensational than the thing you're logically trying to have a civil discourse about.
Yeah.
And that's where that's where the breadcrumbs lead you, is if they're trying to take something that is 1 + 1 = 2 and make it 6 divided by the square root of 307, you're like, whoa, hold on.
You're overcomplicating this
Like
now, because
I'm actually just trying to talk about whether or not it makes sense for us to have gender neutral bathrooms in schools. Like
Right.
that's all I like, or whatever the topic is, right?
Right.
Like I'm just actually trying to ask about whether or not we should have an open border where, recently deported immigrants can come in and rape and murder United States citizens. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Because we had 2 in custody in Texas that we deported. They came back on catch and release, and then they raped and murdered Jocelyn Nungaray. So, like, can we just have a conversation about that? No, that's January 6th, Charlottesville, racism. Like, it's like, whoa, hold on, breadcrumbs.
Yeah, and I think that we're trying to deal with a lot of very complicated things. What we're going to get into here in a minute with Tucker and Tulsi. This is international conflict. This is some really, really big deals. This is a really big deal. This is stuff that is the fate of the world type stuff that we are really on the brink of, that we have to worry about. And the basics are things that they shouldn't really be screwing with, but they are screwing with the basics. Keep a border closed so that we can feel relatively safe, in our neighborhoods. Nope, they got to open the border to cause, distractions for the people. We're focused on, being able to afford groceries. We're America. We're the most powerful nation in the world. We are the wealthiest nation in the world. Our poorest do better than, 98% of the rest of the world. And yet they're upending just our ability to buy eggs, bread, enough to eat, right? They're really trying to screw with the system here in America, disrupt the basics so that we can't focus on these bigger issues. And these bigger issues are the ones that are going to bring down our nation, bring down our economy, that are going to cost us more blood and treasure in foreign countries. And, when people aren't, it's the deception is so obvious to me. And I want to make it obvious to everybody else that we have bigger issues. If your leadership, like a Joe Biden presidency, if our House, our Senate, these career politicians that we've got can't handle the basics, and they're spinning us out of house and home and destroying just our basic way of life, then this is time for radical change. It really is time for radical change. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the most important question in any political debate, I won't say just any debate in general, but any political debate, is, are you better off before or after? And if we can separate emotion, and as we talked about before, Trump derangement syndrome, and look, again, there's no anybody on this podcast, or certainly not me, that's saying he's the best thing since sliced bread. No, there's a man with flaws, character flaws and morality flaws, and that's fine. It's not fine, but I'm just saying, I'm acknowledging the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. However, when we've said that we're able to delineate and separate that the only thing that matters is his former character flaws from his ability to lead our nation, and that's the morality and character flaws are the more important thing than his ability to safely safeguard this idea of a republic and a democracy and an institution created by the Constitution, then we just need to take a step back from the emotion. It's almost like when you're getting in a fight with your spouse or significant other, in my case, that, and also kids. You have to step away from the emotion from that and say, hold on a second, what am I actually upset about? And I think what you're going to find is the things that you're more upset about aren't the things that are most important. And I mean, they're certainly not for me. And I'm worse off than I was 4 years ago. I just am. Yeah. I have less money. I have less margin in my life than I did 4 years ago. And is the presidency the only person responsible for that, or the only reason responsible for that? No. But the presidency and the people he appointed to run his offices are. And so when you look at the Department of Justice as an example, not enforcing the laws, that's a problem. Yeah. Right? Like that's
or the Department of Justice being
directly appointed by the President of the United States.
Yeah. Or the Department of Justice being weaponized against one other person in the instance of Trump.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're 100% right. But the big issue, I'm gonna switch us over to this one. But the big issue that we were talking about before, Tulsi and Tucker, this is the thing that if we had a normally, let me rephrase, Chuck, because we've always had political conflict, right? It's been contentious for centuries, right?
And we were created to have that, right?
Right,
Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton got into a daggum pistol fight, right?
Exactly,
because they had a difference of opinion.
Exactly.
So
exactly,
we were created to have discourse.
But that was at a time when and in the early century and a half or so of our country, the basics were taken care of because it was individual personal responsibility. We take care of ourselves. We take care of our family. We didn't have these massive government entities that were running all these aspects of our lives. And that's the fear that or I won't say the fear, but that's my big beef with big government. Same thing that I reference all the time and will continue to do so is Eisenhower telling us about a military-industrial complex, a scientific and technological elite, these nefarious little entities that can now pull the strings behind big government. They can disrupt all this stuff that we're talking about. Our basic way of life, they have the ability to do it. They have the ability to control the politicians. When you said it's not just the president, yeah, we've got three co-equal branches of government that all have to be functioning the same. And I think we could agree that the House and the Senate do not function properly, right? So,
and I would say, just for a hot second, Mike Lee from Utah, a brilliant constitutional conservative about this, but one of the things that he harps on is when they created the fabric of government and the three equal platforms of government in executive, legislative, and judicial. Legislative was created to be the most powerful piece
Yes, it
because they are
was.
creating the roles for society and the rules for society. And executive was meant to run the day to day, and judicial was meant to sort out the problems in between. And we have um, we have taken away the importance and the value of the legislative branch over time, and particularly over the last 50 years, and said that's not nearly as important as having one person or one branch run Earth, or in this
Right.
case, run our country.
Right.
So I just think it's important to remember that. If you look back at how valuable being a congressman or a senator was 50 years ago, they had enormous influence. And look, I'm not going to tell you what state I live in because there's weird folks out there listening, but I'll just tell you the state I live in, I can tell you who one of my representatives is. I can tell you who both my senators are, but there's a bunch of representatives from my state. I can tell you who one of them is.
Yeah.
And look, that I'm guilty of that. I need to do more research. I need to do more homework, but I can tell you who represents me where I live in this state. And I can tell you the two senators that represent me. I've been to visit one of them, and I told him what I think about his policies. So all
Good
that to
for
say,
you.
we have
That's
made
good.
the executive branch way more powerful over time, and particularly in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Relatedly, if you guys remember from a previous podcast with Chuck and Jared, this is the first election where someone other than a Bush, Biden, Obama, Clinton, and Carter are up for office.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
That
It's really
again,
wild.
breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Breadcrumbs, right? Like they're showing you who they are.
Yeah. Very true.
Right.
I was going to say, I'm okay with saying where I'm at. I'm Diana Harshbarger. She's my representative. Y'all can look it up. I don't care. All right. So let me play some of this clip. This is from 5:30 to about 7:15. Tulsi and Tucker talking about some really cool stuff. So let me play this piece for us real quick.
This is how it really works. But I'll stop and ask you what you think of it.
I have a very simple message for my Democrat friends, my independent friends, those who may not be sure about who they're voting for in this election. Dick Cheney has just made the choice very clear. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney, the architect of everything that has gone wrong in the Middle East for the last few decades. And so it's interesting because if you listen to the New York Times or some of the other mainstream media, they're saying, don't expect much from Kamala Harris in the way of policies and details and plans, and we're not going to know much about what kind of president she's going to be because she doesn't have much time. They're conveniently ignoring the fact that she's been there working in the White House the last 3.5 years.
I just realized I got this playing on fast speed here. Hang on. Let me play this a little slower. Sorry about that.
Especially for a girl from Hawaii, that was way too fast for her.
Yeah, I know.
Everything in Hawaii is like slow and peaceful.
Alongside Joe Biden. She's been the last one in the room, according to her, as these big decisions are being made. But we look at who she says, her response to the Dick Cheney announcement today was that she was honored to have his endorsement. And we got military veterans in the house. Got a lot of you who probably served in the Middle East like I did. And so it sickened me, Tucker, to read those words today, both from Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, and Kamala Harris, because we have people who we care very much about who were killed in those wars because of Dick Cheney.
So that's the first segment. Sorry about playing that in rapid speed there. That's how I watch videos anymore. I'm like, put it on fast speed. Let me do it that way. But no, this is true. Like I look at Tulsi, and she's lived the combat experience, right? I think she's got her combat. Is it the combat medics badge? I forget what it is. CFMB maybe. Anyway,
I can tell you, I'm on her page right now. Hang on.
No, okay.
Combat medical badge and meritorious service medal.
Okay, all right. And so she's kind of a. She's a bit of an alpha female, I guess you could say. But at the same time, she shows a lot of her more, I guess, softer side. I was watching her on a podcast not too long ago where she was talking about her issues with having a child and having a family with her and her husband. She kind of opened up about some of her personal life and all this. And, she's part of this female movement, right, that has been going conservative. She, again, as I say, she's this kind of a leader female, when it comes to, that's probably a bad way to put it. How would you describe this? She's more of an alpha female is really what it is.
Yeah, she's a badass lady. So
Right. And so she is stepping out of the left. She was the, I think we'd highlighted this before. She was the vice chair of the Democrat Party. Isn't that what it was? Isn't that what they had talked
yeah,
about? And so she has,
I got all kinds of content on this. So you just
yeah.
prime me for the.
Okay. So here's my question. This is my question for you. I want your opinion on it. Why are so many, what it seems to be, so many women looking to fall in line and be accepted by the left, which is where they typically sit, rather than stepping out and saying, I'm going to embrace some of these more conservative ideals like the people, like the Tulsi type folks are doing? And I know that's kind of a broad question, but I was reading, and I had this in one of my recent videos. Young women in particular is what I'm kind of concerned about, 19 to 29, are 70%, it's somewhere around 70% voting Democrat. Young men are about the same number, 60% or so, going conservative. And so this is the impact this is having at the young people level, the future generations for our country, is kind of concerning to me. But
Yeah.
even in the older demographics, women are 68%. I think was the last number I read. We're kind of maintaining that more leftist perspective. Does that make sense? And so I'm trying to find,
Yep.
it doesn't have to be a woman who's in the military who's going to exit to the right. It has to be people who have kind of similar morals and ideals to Tulsi Gabbard and people like her. Am I kind of butchering this question? But you kind of get where I'm standing for. I just don't understand it. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I'm rewinding to the poet laureate, all time iconic country music band, Alabama, when they say in the Song of the South, Daddy was a veteran, a Southern Democrat. What did they say after that, Jared?
You ought to get a rich man to vote, or you can't. Yeah, you ought to find a rich
You
man to
ought
vote
to
like.
get a rich man to vote like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And why is that important to remind yourself of? Is for history until, I don't know, 20 years ago, until Al Gore, I guess, because Al Gore grew up in wealth and politics in D.C. Al Gore Jr., technically. Until he ran for president, the Democratic Party, and look, maybe I'm missing, and so don't hear, I'm not a historian. I'm just kind of spitting balling from my mouth right now. But so maybe there's more legacy than that. But for all of history, the Democratic Party has been the party of blue collar working people. And the Republican Party, since its creation, has been the party of elite and educated and not snobbery, but I don't know. I mean, it's something in that direction, right? I mean, and roles have reversed now, which is hilarious. And so I think the disposition generically, I'm saying this like I know, but I think my wife's instinct would be to say, oh, the Democratic Party would be the party for women because they value women's values, and they she would probably say something like that, right? Like, oh, they're for women, or they're pro women, or pro women's rights, or something like that. Which again, historically, has probably been true, except now they're kind of not.
right,
Right. So
right.
I again back to the earlier segment, and we'll get into the Dick Cheney thing here in a minute, but the breadcrumbs lead you to a place where I think Tulsi's arriving at this thing where it's like, I can't continue to stand for this stuff that's not the same values that I subscribe to. Like, she signed up to serve this country in conflict, both domestic and foreign, just like you did, and did so just like you did. And as a result of that, you have a deep appreciation for what America really values. And when you start sensationalizing things like, I don't know, pick whatever female right you want to challenge. I mean, when you start saying things like you're going to have a man show up and what she says in this podcast, and you're going to say, yeah, I'm for the idea that a man can come kick the ass of a female, and we'll call him a male, or call him a female, excuse me. Like, wait, what?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's not a female value. That's not pro female. That's also not pro American. Like it used to be 20 years ago when Jared and I grew up, or 25. We're older than that. Long time ago when Jared and I grew up, and then even longer than that when our dads grew up or our granddads grew up. if a guy punched a female, there was an immediate and demonstrative response,
Yeah.
right? But now we're saying this is pro female if you value those things. I mean, Tulsi's like a reasonable American veteran. She's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Well,
So I
and
just think that the parties have kind of switched sides. The Democratic Party has become the party of the elites, and the Republican Party has become the party of working class, reasonable. Let's think through what we're actually saying. Conversation.
yeah. Well, I love how she's kind of turned on the, she's always been, I guess, opposed to war. She hasn't been as vocal about it, or wasn't early on wasn't as vocal about it, but has become more vocal about it. Presumably since she deployed and experienced all that over there. She was, I think she's done 2 deployments. One was to Iraq, I believe. The other was in Kuwait, if I read her bio correctly. But now, of course, she's calling out the Dick Cheneys of the world and the military-industrial complex of the world. And I think that's a key component of, and I hate to make this about male and female, but I kind of feel like I have to. The not wanting to just go fight these endless wars. Yeah, there's a lot of, I'm that way, right? I've spent 21 years in the military, both active duty and reserve, and I got sick of war. Like, war is not something that anybody wants, but the delivery of it from a female perspective is a bit different. I feel like that.
Hey, sorry, I may interrupt you briefly. I just wanted to ask: were you a command sergeant major, like the vice presidential candidate? No,
Okay.
sorry. Okay, keep
He
going.
was not
You're
a
good.
command sergeant major. Goodness gracious, but he was frocked, briefly frocked, but he did not retire as one. But anyway, no, she's calling out the Dick Cheneys of the world and the Hillary Clintons of the world. She's called out them and the Liz Cheneys of the world, and she's tired of these, forever wars is what she calls them and what a lot of people call them. But I think the delivery from a female perspective is incredibly useful because there's kind of the men tend to, and especially soldiers, we were always amped up like, come on, let me get in there and get into that fight sort of thing. And I think to get that perspective, and I might be completely off base on my thinking of this, but to get that perspective from a woman that, no, we need to temper our,
One of the reasons I sent this to Jared is because I think, again, back to the breadcrumbs comment from earlier, one of the things that she's trying to evangelize and educate us on from a society standpoint is, look, she's an outsider. One, she's not a Republican now. RFK is not a Republican now.
right.
But here you have one iconic American family in the Kennedys, and 2, the former previously appointed future of the Democratic Party in Tulsi Gabbard, where you have 2 icons here that the Democratic Party has said, we're going to ride these ships. And 2 of those people, one member of the big family and then 2 Tulsi, have said, actually, the BS test on this stuff is not great. And at the risk of probably my personal safety, meaning RFK, perhaps Tulsi as well, at the risk of my political future, for sure, for both of them, they're saying, yeah, I'm willing to risk that stuff and step out because it just doesn't match up. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And so again, let the breadcrumbs lead you where they are actually going. Don't be misled by the smoke and mirrors up front. And the point about Dick Cheney is like, this guy's been in the American government for 50 years. He's been involved in conflict after conflict. And I'm not going to recount his story and his history, but yeah, I mean, you can look at the, what are the movies called where they make fun of an actual story?
I can't remember what it's called. Not satire,
like
but it's
Hot
like
Shots was making fun of Top Gun.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
There's a movie about Dick Cheney, like him shooting somebody because he did.
Right, because he did.
There's a funny name for that. Anyway, regardless, my point is, this guy's been around for 50 years, waving his hands and orchestrating things.
Well, and his family has multiple houses too, based on the money they've made from war. I mean, that's one of the biggest issues when you have a family who is a military industrial complex contractor and is also sitting as the vice president of the United States and whose daughter got filthy rich off of war. That sort of involvement is what we've been warned about for decades. I mean, since 61.
Right. And rewind yourself 4 years. What did she do? What did the daughter do 4 years ago so that she could stay relevant and in the front of politics? She argued that Donald Trump is the devil. He's going to ruin the world. Don't elect him, blah, blah, blah. And so what did left-wing media do? They have him on every talk show, bring him on The View as often as possible, put him on every platform.
They say, see, even Republicans don't like him.
He's not for women's rights. He hates women. Look what he did in his past, blah, blah. I mean, and what did America realize? We don't want Liz Cheney in Congress. So what they do? They voted her dumbass out.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
that's it. Well, and then they come on board, and even
breadcrumbs lead to actual truth, right? The breadcrumbs lead you to a bread loaf, right? Pie crumbs lead you to a pie, and so you have to pay attention to what's real versus what's wrong. And
well, Kamala Harris said this in the debate the other night. She said, this is why I've gotten the endorsement of 200 Republicans of the, and she mentioned Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and Mitt Romney. And I was like, honey, those aren't Republicans. I hate to tell you, those ain't Republicans.
Oh,
you got a few Democrats that are masquerading as Republicans. These are the skin suit people, of the Republican Party.
And you got people that want to stay relevant and stay in power, which is why term limits are so important, because there should never be a reason for somebody like Strom Thurmond to stay in Congress for 70 years. There just shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, again, back to where you were talking earlier about the elevation of the legislative branch. That's not what's good for society. It's just not.
I'm going to play one more clip here, and this is the one that will close on this one. But she highlights some really important stuff here. Let me play this last
lives of my brothers and sisters in uniform.
So you were a sitting Democratic member of Congress, and you know them all, obviously. Them all, from Hillary Clinton, who hates you with a special kind of ferocity. I think she's called for putting you in prison.
This is true.
I think she literally wants to put you in prison. I think she said that. So I'm happy to have you join the exclusive club that I belong to. But like, what do they think of this? It's the Democratic Party, at least when I was growing up, was the party of, hold a bake sale. The Pentagon doesn't need more bombers or whatever. And now it's just kill them all, let God sort them out because we're getting rich doing it. Are they comfortable with this? Like, what do they think of this behind closed doors?
This is again showing kind of the realignment where you have Adam Kinzinger and Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney supporting and endorsing Kamala Harris proudly, people who have been neocons and are neocons, not hesitating to say, let's go to war in any and all situations, regardless of the cost and consequence. And then you have people like Bobby Kennedy and myself and others who are standing with Donald Trump, not because we agree on every single thing under the sun, but because we agree on the most important things, which is really about our ability as Americans to live and thrive in a truly free and prosperous society. And we cannot be free or prosperous unless we're at peace.
I remember when the war in Ukraine broke out in February of 2022, and I just want to say at the outset, there are tons of people I respect and love and am related to who had very different views of that war than mine. I don't judge anyone who reaches different conclusions. But the one thing that I do judge people on is not caring about getting in a nuclear war. I just have too many children, I guess. And you were one of the first people to say, whatever you think of this conflict or how it started or how it might end, we should be concerned because this is the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet, and we could wind up in a nuclear war that would kill everyone in the world. And I remember that you were denounced as like a Nazi for worrying about nuclear war.
Yeah.
And now we're even closer. Does anyone in Washington understand this or care?
They don't care. That's a fact. If they did care, they wouldn't speak so easily about the fact that we are closer to the brink of nuclear war than ever before in our country's history. I was warning about this back in 2019, 2020 when I was running for president. talking about this threat, how if we are continuing to wage what then I called a new Cold War, if we're continuing to increase tensions and heighten tensions with other nuclear-armed countries in the world, the inevitable outcome of that is nuclear war, and we should all be very clear-eyed about what that means.
So this is I guess for lack of a better term, this is the thing that people don't talk about anymore. They think the Cold War is over. They think that, those types of concerns about nuclear war are, it's just bunk. That's a bunch of ridiculousness. And she has been, like she said, been harping on this since 2019, and being in a proxy war with the largest nuclear power in the world, which is Russia. I mean, some people say that I don't know exactly what our arsenal is right now, but we're neck and neck there with Russia. They're somewhere around the same number. This is a legitimate concern, and I don't think enough people are actually worried about this. They're worried about wearing the blue and yellow lapel pins to support Ukraine, but we are in a proxy war with a massive nuclear power, and we're in trade wars with another nuclear power, which is China. This is a big deal. Maybe these are the things that we need to be worried about.
Yeah, you and I have a friend that we grew up with who works in a branch of the government that's been very closely tied to the Ukraine response. And in talking to him, it's just a proxy war. It just is. And there are two sides to that. You could rationally say, is it right for me to pay my friend to fight my enemy? Yes. Okay, that makes logical sense. And then also at some point, you're going to piss off the enemy.
But here's the thing, Chuck. I'm okay with that when we have the money. We don't have the money. In the grand scheme of things, you could make an argument about us fighting. Right, you could make us our proxy war with Israel, our proxy war in Syria, our proxy war in Ukraine, proxy war, and we've got umpteen million tiny little conflicts that we're feeding money or pumping money and weapons into around the world because we've got a justification for every one of them. There's not a damn one of them that we can't justify in a briefing to some 4-star general or some 3-star general whose entire position exists to pump Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Boeing, all these companies and their armaments into these different parts of the world. And I don't buy that bullshit anymore. I'm sorry, but I really don't. And so it's like, okay, yeah, Ukraine, Russia. Look, people have been taking over other countries for the entirety of mankind. And people, it happened here in America, the Native Americans. I don't know all the specifics around them, but you can read all the history, but between the Sioux and the Cheyenne and the Cherokee and all these people occupying their land, taking stuff, that's part of human nature. But for some reason, we think that we are going to be the arbiters of all these other conflicts around the world. And the only thing that happens is we expend our blood, our treasure in foreign lands that, people die at the hands of our decisions. And we say, well, we've got a justification for that. Dan Crenshaw, why we stayed in these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan for 25 years. Well, you didn't get another 9/11. Yeah, and we spent $4 trillion we didn't have. And as soon as we left, it was taken over by the nut jobs, just like it did in the 70s when we were fighting a proxy war in Afghanistan. The nut jobs took over. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're leading me down two different paths, but on the Ukraine piece specifically, I would just say that, failure to plan means you're planning to fail. And we've known for a long time that Putin was wanting to install the pipeline through Ukraine so he could sell oil. And under President Trump, that stopped. And again, back to the theme of tonight, breadcrumbs. On January 20th of 2021, guess what happened? Joe Biden nixed the deal on the Keystone Pipeline. That's the one in Alaska. But he also, I'm forgetting the name of the pipeline in Europe. It's going to come to me in a second. But he nixed the deal in the pipeline in Europe where Ukraine was preventing Russia from going through Ukraine to get to the rest of Europe. And so what happened on his very first day in office is he blew up some metal pipes at the bottom of the ocean. What'd you find?
Is Nord Stream 2. That was it.
Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you. On his very first day in office, he pulled back restrictions on Nord Stream 2. And on his very first day in office, Putin immediately started rebuilding Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's just facts. There's no emotion attached to it. It's just real. And so what happened as a result of that? Eventually, the Russian people, and Putin specifically, gets tired of fooling around with arguing with Ukraine. They invade it, and they take over it. That was his plan from the very beginning. Breadcrumbs lead you to where you want to go, and that's true. Now, separately on the Crenshaw, Afghanistan war stuff, yeah, that's probably a separate
That's a separate conversation. What I'm saying is we have moved for a very long time from conflict to conflict, and then we have the little intermediary conflicts where we say, oh, we got to kind of worry about this one over here. When our soldiers aren't fighting, we got to be paying or pumping money and munitions into other soldiers that are fighting. Got to keep that military industrial complex humming, and it drives me freaking bananas, Chuck, because ultimately, are we having the impact that they tell us that we're having? No, I don't think we are. No, we're absolutely not.
Of course we're not. But the answer is, and we talked about this on a previous podcast, what wins elections? War.
Oh yeah.
Who's the only president in the last 50 years who didn't drive us into war?
Donald Trump.
And this is not because I think he's Jesus or the savior or the best moral compass of human history. He's just the only person that hasn't taken us to war in the last 50 years.
But
period.
Not just that. It's not just that, Chuck. You are correct. He has not. But he is not part of the same group that you mentioned at the outset of this podcast. The Bushes, the Clintons, the same dynasties, right? The Obama, Bush, Clinton, I'm doing it out of order, but Carter, all those folks. Those people are the same ones that Dick Cheney has helped get elected, that all the other military industrial complex folks have gotten elected, that know that there is profit for these people. There's profit for donors in war. And he said, no, I ain't taking all that money. I'm getting money from the people. And he took some money from some big donors, but not from the military industrial complex. And even if he had, he's saying, I don't care if you want, I'm tired of the killing. This is what he says about Russia and Ukraine. I'm tired. They say, who's going to win the war? Because the mainstream media wants you to say Ukraine is going to win and Russia is going to lose. And he says, I want the killing to stop. It's not going to be a pretty no armistice or ceasefire or treaty is, into the war is going to be perfect for every side. There's going to be some, give and take. There's going to be some negotiation. And the media doesn't want to hear that. Because they want it to go until Ukraine wins, and Ukraine's not going to win.
That's a good place to put a placeholder in that encourage people to go listen to the Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson conversation. I mentioned this to my wife. She said, I'm not a Tucker fan. I was like, okay, separate the emotion from it. Just assume you're listening to two people have a conversation.
Yeah.
The reality is Tulsi doesn't want to see, in which you started one of the clips right there on the end of. Tulsi is not willing to let American veterans like Jared and other friends that we talk to on this podcast and other friends that we all have go stick their necks on the line for the purposes of someone else getting rich or getting famous or continuing a lineage of power.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happening. And you need to follow the breadcrumbs and pay attention to what you think you're seeing and you hope you're not seeing, because you actually are seeing it. They're showing you all their telltale signs. Also, relatedly, has anybody found cocaine in the White House? That might be a problem.
Could be a problem. Yeah. All right, buddy. Well, hey, thank you. Thanks so much for being here, man. It's always good. This is a great hour. It was actually almost 2 hours for us actually talking. It's always a great conversation. Thanks so much for being here. And everybody, thank y'all for staying to the end. We truly appreciate it. Be sure to go to continuefreedom.com, sign up for my mailing list. And of course, with this video, hit us with a like and a subscribe. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Love you guys. God bless America.